right. Here we are. Welcome, Michelle. Thanks for joining.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Been a minute. I figure it's worth telling folks, known you for quite a while now, I guess since
Yes.
yeah,
Well, 11.
2011. 2011.
Yes, 11.
We're
My
our
son was
past
born.
clause at the faithful Latin world of Gensler. Seems
That's
to be
right.
the case with most people in our industry that have spent some amount of time there. It's hard to find people who haven't.
I know, right. Exactly. But yeah, it was what, 3 months or so, and then I jumped ship.
And that was crazy times. And there's a lot of when I think back to what I know now versus what I knew then about workplace and what I've learned. And there's some things that we're still saying today that we're saying back then. But fortunately, a lot of the conversation has moved along. But I am shocked at the times where I meet somebody and we say something that you would have said back in
Oh,
2011.
yeah. Oh,
They
yeah.
this and it's like a new idea. And then I realized just how much work there is to do to improve the quality
Mm.
of where people work.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the things are just recirculating a little bit differently, but it's still some of these premises are still staying the same, and it's just a new way of trying to do it differently, but I don't know.
Before we get started, tell our folks who might be watching this a little bit about yourself and what you're up to and what your
Okay.
kind of goals are today for, or if aspirations for what you might do with the world of workplace.
Yeah. So I have a background in design, architecture and design. So again, started for about 15 years. And then I am now working for PMC, which is a company. We create spaces really that to help employees boost their performance and engagement. We curate furniture, technology, architectural elements, all of that seamlessly to really deliver spaces that people love. And my role primarily is to make sure we're creating these solutions to be the best they can by leveraging the research that's out there and then just creativity and design expertise to really inform those applications. So, and I think my passion is really just trying to educate leaders and influencers and everybody out there that there is still a lot of power in the design of the workplace and why it is so important now
Mhm.
more than ever when everybody's trying to figure out what to do with their workplace. But I mean, I believe I'm not talking about RTO, but I wholeheartedly believe in autonomy, but I also really believe the workplace still should
Right.
have a presence and it needs to just be figured out for,
Right.
I mean, each company really has its own meaning behind what the workplace should be.
Totally agree. I mean, I think that's one of the most important parts is that companies are developing something that means something to them that is
Mhm.
actually going to is not just a because we need to have it, but it's because it's going to help us do these things.
Right.
And I think that's what's great. And to me, what I've always appreciated, about you, and then especially seeing the post you're doing now on this topic is about the power of design. It's not just so yes, aesthetic. People hear the word design, and
Yeah.
it's like, immediately that's aesthetics. Like, how does it look?
Yeah.
That's one aspect of design of a workplace. And the reality is the workplace, it's a vehicle to allow people to get things done more effectively, to be more connected with one another, to learn from one another. And so I think it's what you're doing is really important to continue to talk and educate people about just the way they think about it and talk about it. So, I mean, I really appreciate what you're doing out there.
Yeah. And I think too, the spin that I'm also trying to put out there, which isn't so saturated yet, is the philosophy behind the brain health and what really can do. Like there really is science behind how space, the built environment, can affect how you live and act and work and all that. So if you can start to incorporate those things into your workspaces, then ultimately you're going to get the best out of your brain and get the best work and all the things. So that research has really been fascinating to me and I'm just trying to dig more into that. And I think it goes into the whole idea of neurodiversity and all of that too. So there's so much out there that I think can be brought to the table and recognized.
Totally. And so that is a great segue into what I was hoping we could talk about today was kind of reflecting on the online session we had a couple weeks ago with Aaron Hurst. Just for anybody watching, listening, doesn't know, Aaron Hurst is CEO of something called the U.S. Chamber of Connection, When I first saw it, I thought it was like a new government office, but it's not. He's at all. It's a not for profit, and this guy is amazing. He's like 15 or 18 years He's started 4 or 5 nonprofits. I mean, he blew me away. I didn't know him before this, but just learning about him, I was
Yeah.
really impressed. Everything he does is around connecting, trying to do good. And he started off about trying to help people connect more to not for profits and bring talent to those companies that could really benefit from it. And then he moved into this, in his mind, like one of the biggest issues we have facing us right now is a lack of connection between people,
Mhm.
which has a lot to do with when you think about what you were just talking about and every neurodiversity is just one aspect of the human condition and a big part of human well-being has to do with relationships. And there's all sorts of evidence out there that points to people who have lots of relationships and a supportive network live longer than people that
Yeah.
don't. And they have a more fulfilled life experience. So to that point, one of the first things that I want to get your take on, Aaron talked about finding meaning at work. And I'm going to read this just so I get it right. He shared some research that he said of people who are fulfilled in life, only 1% of those people weren't fulfilled at work, which really is making a strong connection between because you hear people all the time. And I know tons of people in my life who will say, not everybody can be like you. And because I love what I do, I'm passionate about it. And they're like,
Yeah.
I'm not creative. I just need a job where I get things done and then I get work done and I get out of it and then I live life. And to me, it's really hard to deal with that idea because so much of our life is spent working,
Yeah.
and to think that you wouldn't be fulfilled, but that to me, that aligns with the idea that a lot of those people just aren't fulfilled in life, and they're saying that, "Well, it's mostly because of work that I'm not." But I
Yeah.
think did that number surprise you or
Well, I think there was, maybe I misread it wrong, but I saw 2 different things about if they say that 1% was it 1% was not fulfilled.
who were
Of the one
fulfilled at
of
work.
the people who are fulfilled at work, 1% were not.
Right.
So that tells me, 1, that surprises me that if that many people are fulfilled in life, then that means a lot of them are fulfilled at work. So I was surprised that many people say they're fulfilled at work because you would think with, I don't know, all the doom and gloom and mandates and all this stuff about RTO that people really wouldn't be fulfilled at work.
Well, I think a lot of people aren't. I think what it's saying is that most people aren't fulfilled in life, and
Okay.
those who are really
Yeah.
fulfilled at work, and that there's a strong correlation between the two.
Okay, so yeah, if that's the case, so I wasn't 100% sure how to interpret that, but yes, I totally agree that that connection between your life and your work is so strong and dependent on one another, and so that's not really shocking to me at all, especially, I mean, nowadays with the hybrid and the flexibility, I think it is really hard for people to draw that line between work and home. So if the more flexibility you have, I mean, in a way, it can bleed into your personal life. And if you're stressed, it just keeps going throughout the day. Whereas I think traditionally going to an office, you get that you walk into the doors, you start your workday, you leave the doors, you're done with your workday, so you can disassociate. So I think that part, I think that part's probably very true. And I can see that's a huge part of it.
Totally. I mean, there's something there. The nuance of today I've been dealing with dishwasher malfunction problems, and there's a big mess in the kitchen. And I had to jump off 2 calls this morning already because people were coming and going, and I'm dealing with that just before that was part of why I was backed up and then just letting me even joining what we're doing here late.
Yeah.
And some people would say, "Well, it's great that I can do that during the day, and I feel like I've accomplished more, and because I'm working from home today, I was able to do that as opposed to having to do it in the evening, which leads to a better work-life balance." I would actually say in this case, what it did for me is really distract me all morning.
Yeah.
And I've been dealing with this thing that now, yeah, I don't have to deal with in the evening, but the reality is my work is now going to shift to evening.
Yeah. Sure.
And I'm going to
Right.
do that so that it just starts to, when you don't, to your point, have some sort of disconnection between the two, they just bleed all over and into one another. So you don't know the difference.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
I wonder, if there is some sort of alignment also between that and people saying I'm fulfilled. And I don't know that this is not where he was going with this, but I'm sitting here prognosticating. Is there something about that that more people are feeling less fulfilled now because they think that this is better for me because I have more
Mhm.
convenience, because I'm doing all the things at any time, whatever makes sense. But are they actually getting this comes back to this idea of focus and being part in the moment and doing that thing you're doing instead of I'm doing a little bit of this and a little bit of this and I'm cooking dinner while I'm listening to this podcast, while I'm having a conversation with my
Yeah.
kid. Very different from doing each thing with intention.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think too that part of being fulfilled, in my mind at least, is those is being around the other people and having those organic victories when you don't expect it too. I think, and this goes back to actually a later session that you had, but this idea of you may feel fulfilled by checking off all your tasks that you have for the day, but what
Mhm.
you're forgetting about is like all those other things that you helped other people with organically. And so I just think that there's this layer of not being fulfilled by not being around the other people and getting some of that stimulation from that.
So there's another thing that he brought up that's tied directly to this. And it was the idea that when you meet people, so this is talking about strangers, when you meet people at restaurants or someplace out of home, you don't learn much about them and they might not let you in.
Yeah.
But the suggestion was if you meet somebody on Zoom, automatically now, if they have a blurred background up, you don't see anything and you don't really know where they're at. But
Mhm.
assuming that their background is not blurred, they're technically letting you into their home.
Yeah.
And but conversely, when people show up at work, if they're showing up to work and they're just there and they're just like a zombie because I just had someone told me I had to be here and I
Yeah.
don't really want to
Yeah.
be here. What are the things, and then going back to some of what you were thinking about in terms of the mental side of things, like what are some of the things we can think of that we could do either what can the place do to encourage people to
Yeah.
be more alive and more with it and more part of the experience when they're there in person?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for sure. Well, I mean, one thing which is really hard to control, but it should be a number one thing is just the culture of your company. That really needs you need to have kind of a precedent of that it is a social and fun and you're able to take a minute to socialize and not be slapped on the wrist for not getting your work done. I mean, I don't think a lot of companies are like that, but maybe they are. But it's definitely having spaces that give permission for you to have that social connection. So it's having the lounges and the cafes and the work settings that encourage people to collaborate freely and I think again back to that permission that it's okay. That's part of building trust and that's when you build trust with your teammates, that's when the magic happens. So you really need to have permission to let that happen and to have the spaces to allow for that. And I would also say, I think with assigned seating and stuff too, I think that naturally helps with building team cohesion tightly. Not to say that you shouldn't have one offs with other people and having that spontaneous collaboration too is great. But I think there's a lot of things you can deliberately do to make sure you're connecting with people and building that trust.
I was when you were talking about that, I was flashing back to early 2010s, when even like 2015, when law firms were starting to do the whole we have this cool communal space because we're all in closed offices. So we started to do these
Yeah.
spaces in libraries and really nice cafes. And then no one would ever sit there because if the managing partners were out there, they were scared to death that someone was going to notice that on one of their 15-minute increments, they weren't working. I think a big part of this, of what you're talking about, is bringing, expanding the definition of the word work and all the things that make up work. And it's not just being on a call. It's not
Mhm.
just typing an email or
Yeah. It's
a
checking
cool
your
something.
checklist, getting that checked off. That's not where your day ends. There's so
Right.
many other things that can make a difference, and you don't know it. Like, I think what I was saying is, like, you may have run into the intern or someone doesn't have a lot of experience, and just by talking them through something, it's what you've done to them for that day is a
Mhm.
huge benefit that maybe not be on your list, but it takes them a lot further.
Well, I think I've talked about this a lot. Middle managers, upper managers, most of them are at a point in life where they benefit a lot personally from not being around, from being at home and spending most of their time there. Because just from a, like the thing I mentioned earlier, but it really has to do with kids and life and all
Mhm.
things. And just from a practicality perspective, they're not then working. They feel like they're not working till 10 o'clock at night because they don't have a
Yeah,
2 hour commute and all these other things. But they're they're the ones that are most likely to take a junior person and push them off and say, "Well, get on my calendar. We'll talk about that." And they look and they're like, "Well, you don't have anything available for 3 weeks." And it's probably something that would they might even remember what it was that they were trying to connect about. But like right now, I get to ask a question, and there's always a healthy balance there of me, like when I was really young, being an annoying intern, asking everybody questions all the time, and
right.
people be like, "Hey, go look it up first before you come ask me." And
Yeah,
but I do think that that transfer of information knowledge, that connection to other people. I mean, I think it's modeling the behavior of if you want people to get something out of it, you need to give something. And
yeah,
that's most individuals, whether you're a leader or whether you're an individual contributor. I think it's that mindset of I'm coming with intention. If I'm going to come together in person, I'm going to spend time in an office. I'm going to do it in a way where I'm going to try and add value to the time that's here, the time that I'm here, which I think is I go back the value of not being there every day is maybe you value it more than the
yeah,
people who start to do whatever they do in life. If you do it every day, some people
right,
quickly take it for granted and
right,
then put the energy in.
right, right. Yeah, no, I mean, I yeah, completely agree. Yeah, and to your point, the level of autonomy is super important, and but there it's just knowing that there is other things out there that you can be doing at the office that you just
Right.
don't recognize.
So three of the things Aaron talked about when he talked about fulfillment in life was relationships, impact, and growth. For him, for our relationships, it was that you're having positive, consistent, and vulnerable interaction. So that goes to what we're talking about right here. It's making yourself available. If you're going to be there, you're being available. And then impact, you perceive that your work makes a difference. And then
Yeah,
growth, you're challenging yourself beyond your comfort zone.
yeah.
So anything that comes to mind that, that we might do beyond the culture, like specific things for either one of these relationships, impact or growth that we can do as people who create spaces and experiences that might be of value?
Yeah, I mean, I think the as far as the impact, I would believe that's really starting to take more and more of a precedent, especially like with the younger generations. I know the research shows that they really value that there is a purpose behind the company. And I think whatever the and that a lot goes has to do with the culture, but having your space that also reflects that again promotes that you have some a greater cause is really important. So, and I think so that's the younger generation aspect. But then I think there's also a point of life where you in your later years, I think too, that's where you really start to question what is this impact that I have in my life and what's my work doing? And so I think, and maybe not so much space related, but being able to determine what that is and be able to expound upon it more is becomes really important to a
Well,
professional career.
one thing I've thought about a lot in that the whole impact side or okay, I want to work for a company that's making a difference. I want to know that what I'm doing is making a difference.
Yeah.
And for a long time, in my mind and what I learned and as a designer and architect and what I did, what the things that were implemented, a lot of that came down to, well, we put stuff on the walls that seemed to relate to or come from the culture, or it was about the mission, or
Yeah.
sometimes people would write the mission on the wall, or they'd what I think what's more important now is that, and this ties to culture, but the apparatus that are set up to encourage you to work or connect or do whatever in the ways you do it, to me, should be tied to what the company is about. So, for instance, like, should those conversations happen behind closed doors or should those
Yeah.
conversations happen out in the open?
Yeah.
Should we create space where people typically would say, well, those they're confidential. We shouldn't be doing that. And then it's, well, no, maybe that's who we are. Maybe what we
Yeah.
do is
Yeah.
all shared.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. And I think we coach our customers on that quite a bit, like the amount of glass you use. Like, you don't want to have solid walls along all your offices. You really want to make sure that you feel like you can be approached and you're not hiding things. And so it's considerations like that, and having these open environments where it's okay if you overhear. In fact, you want others to overhear what you're saying because you want them to to naturally or organically be a part of that conversation. I think there really are intentional things you can do with a space designed to promote that the culture of having an impact and a greater purpose, and everybody being able to and feel like they can contribute to it too. So,
Have
yeah.
you been seeing the same thing? I mean, and maybe you've come up with some specific strategies, but just the leftover impact of so many people being on Zoom for so long and getting accustomed to no one can hear what I'm saying, and except for the person I'm talking to, so I can control who hears it, and then not wanting to have conversations at a desk anymore, out in the open, or I one of the things I've had a couple conversations in the last couple of weeks about is this idea that, well, maybe when we're in the office and that the sitting together, when we ask people to sit together, we're asking them to sit together because we want them to collaborate. And
Mhm.
that we want what we need is better spaces for heads down work and for alone work or for talking to other people that are just built better, are isolated better, that have better acoustics, but that they're not designed for the group thing. So to me, the direct correlation of this is, well, we have small spaces for individuals to get away and do their heads down thing. But then we herd everybody to communal and shared experiences because why they're there is to connect with one another. And I think that's where I'm hung up still is so many people are still overemphasizing the desk as a place of work adjacent to other people. But I'm curious what your thoughts are like, because I do believe that there's the other argument is like, sitting shoulder to shoulder, just doing our thing, like working,
Yeah.
whatever all the things that entails. If we're both there for an entire day, we will undoubtedly have an impact on one another. Hopefully, there's positive impact.
Yeah.
But if every time I need to take a call, I go away and then you don't suddenly, I'm negating the whole reason that I'm there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough one. But I think, to your point, there are plenty of people who are still going to the office to work. And when I say work, I mean that in more of I need to get my shit done,
Yeah.
focus, need to get stuff done. Whether or not that can happen when you're sitting adjacent to someone, there's plenty of work I think that happens that you can be getting your work done, but you can still be somewhat collaborative and over here and get the best of both worlds. So I think there's spaces that have that type of work function where it is a little bit more collaborative, but then I still think that there are other spaces too that really do need to have the focus. And I know we aren't all able to plan our days meticulously, but there is this you just need to know how you work best and making sure that and the draw is to have a workplace that can support all that. So having all the variety. And so, I mean, I really think you need to have a little bit of everything, and people work for different lengths of time on their task at hand and with different people at the task at hand. So it just really, you got to dive in and understand that and start to create the spaces that can support how your team works.
Well, are you seeing that? I mean, because that is something another thing that I've been seeing and just whispers of, and I've had a few conversations about and trying to develop a couple examples of it, but is not to me, it's like it's beyond variety. It's like excess of options, but not to the point of where I'm overwhelmed because there's four of
Yeah.
them almost identical, but they're just slightly different. And how am I going to know which one? But just that I do have lots of options. I've had some people talk to it as an abundance mindset, and that we're basically trying to give you anything you might need over the course of the day to support what you're doing. But what are you seeing like in terms of, because I know you guys are doing a lot of projects with a lot of companies who are trying to make improvements. And I'm seeing the improvements I'm seeing are mostly incremental. There's very few
Yeah.
sea change sort of things. But in those
Yes.
folks that are improving, are you seeing people start to discount individual desks a little in for these sorts of spaces, or are they still just coming back to desk?
Actually, not really. I mean, I think we still, in fact, are in some of our research that we've done just on our customers here locally, 6 by 6 like workstations are still a big thing. Like people still want dedicated spaces. Assigned seating is still prevalent. So I and I know we're behind. We're in the southeast, so we're not European, we're not the West Coast, and so we're a little bit behind the times, but I still think that there's still a precedent to have spaces that are moderately sized for people to go and do their work. And then what's happening is but everything's elevated, and but there's still a variety of other places for the collaboration and making sure those spaces are supporting the different ways people collaborate, because there certainly is different ways you can collaborate. So I mean that's still what we're seeing.
And you see that across multiple industry types?
Yeah, well, yes and no. We certainly get a lot of engineers and programmers, so maybe
Mhm,
we tend to and they tend to go heavier on the dedicated workspaces that are
mhm.
larger. But that's not to say that we don't have clients too who are doing the free address, and their workstations or their workspaces, individual workspaces are getting smaller so that it affords them to have all these other places to
Mhm.
go to and get their work done. I think the thing I struggle with though is a little bit is this need to still have like your dual monitors. If you want to get work done, whether it's focus work or even collaborative work, I think a lot of these spaces to have a dual monitor is so essential. And so it's hard to have these very hospitable, beautiful spaces that don't have that kind of tech aspect to it too. So
Well, I think there's something I think worth exploring in that. And so take the example of a dual monitor. One, it's a bunch more real estate.
yeah,
I have my laptop, I have a horizontal monitor, a vertical monitor. Lately, and I've had this set up for almost 3 years. I've been thinking lately that I've gotta maybe get rid of one of these because what I've started finding is that I have too many things going on at once visually, and I'm trying to keep up with all the things. I feel like sometimes like I'm somebody doing day trading and I'm just looking at all the different tickers, and at the same time, if I am it because I've heard that all the time because there are people who have 6 monitors at home and have backlights and all the audio set up and it's
yeah,
perfect, and they don't wanna come into the office because it's, "Oh, I
yeah,
got 1 monitor." The reality of it is you maybe the office and being at that desk and being adjacent to those other people and having a focus. I started on this earlier, but there might be something there that actually simplifying your engagement while you're is not a bad thing.
yeah,
And this is
yeah,
one other it's like a whole bunch of digital visual distractions as opposed to why shouldn't you just be doing one thing at one time? And technically should well, I want to be able to have this while I have 2 different spreadsheets up and I put the and it but it is
yeah.
there's definitely a conflict there, I think, brewing.
It is. It definitely is. And like I said, I want to say it is a little bit skewed to the industry and the type of work that you're doing. Although you could argue that everybody needs time to focus, everybody needs time to collaborate. So we all have the certain things that we need to be doing. But I
Well,
don't know.
are you seeing clients I mean, one thing that very few people are doing that I've seen and I think could be really valuable is doing more of an analysis of, okay, this group of folks and the work that they do, most of their tasks include these things. To break it down and say, we design spaces based on the tasks at hand and the jobs to be done, the people that act, the things that are actually doing. And then the tough part is then you get into, well, engineers need this and salespeople need
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
are you getting any more? Because for a long time it's been, well, yeah, we can't solve for 6 different types. I
Yeah.
can't have 6 different types of workstation. But are you seeing any more advanced, like people creating more variety in that, where
Yeah.
they'll have like more specialized solutions based on the task to be done?
We actually just are in the midst of completing a project where it's a company that's their engineers, their architects or designers, there's basic admin type facilities. So they did go pretty deep and explore how they all work differently. And there's 3 different workstation types. And then we gave those who were in a private office, we also offered like 3 different options for them to do a desk setup, because surprisingly, there's different ways a private office could be arranged, just so depending on if you're meeting heavy or you want confidentiality, so you don't want your screen to be towards the corridor,
Mhm.
any of that. So we explored all that, and we did come up with 3 different like workstation options based on how they needed to lay out their engineering drawings, or did they not need, they needed more storage versus more workspace. And then the private offices, funnily enough, we offered them the three different types that we heard them talk about, but they ended up all going back to the same layout. So, and I think that was more of a creature of habit type thing. But so we are going it, and it, I mean, honestly, it depends too on the decision makers and what they, how far they want to take it and how much they want to involve the whole company and give them that, listen to them and get their insights versus just making decisions on their own and what they think is the best for the company. It goes both ways, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of companies are at a point where they either need to decide that they're going to invest more time and money in that process to be more
Yes.
dialed into what people need, or they're going to
Yeah.
just, or they're going to say they don't care, or they're going to
Right.
say, I don't care. And this is what I'm doing. And you can either like it or not. And I think the former is a long-term solution. The investing in who your people are, what they do, and if you come back to the things we've been talking about earlier today, if we think about fulfillment coming from relationships, impact, and growth, there's a chance for workplaces to have a significantly positive impact on all three of those things, and to bring those to life. So, I mean, I think it's definitely a worthwhile potential framework to add and layer on top of
Yeah.
what all been doing. The last thing I wanted to get into was Aaron shared 6 points of connection. So we had having a neighbor you can reach out to when you need help, which I think is strongly analogous in work at work. If you're in
Mhm.
and you can have a neighbor that doesn't sit next to you physically and that you reach out to regularly, that's like your work buddy, but having that person in a physical place, there's definitely, because not only it's like if I ping you on Slack or Teams and I get a response, like one thing I've done, I do a lot in life is I read something and I decide someone's either not happy or they're confused or whatever. And because of the punctuation or lack thereof, which is very different from if I'm talking to you and you say it, I know how you feel. And I get that. So the idea of a neighbor you can reach out to when you need help, I mean, because it could be work or personal, having at least 2 meaningful one-on-one interactions weekly, and this says outside of home or work, but I do
Right.
think that for a lot of people, they're not making this is what and this is in Aaron's research, I've done research on this, and we're more lonely as a society than we've ever been, and a lot of people don't have connections outside of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a
Right.
real role for work to play there.
Right. Yeah. And I was, for that one, I was thinking too, going back to the younger generations, and I was having, so I have a son who's a junior in college, and I'm thinking like he's actually going to graduate in December, and thinking about what's he going to do, and if he were to move to another state, and just to have a kind of start his life over, he needs those connections, and the place he's going to find it is work. And so if you can't, if your company cannot provide that, if your culture doesn't provide that, I mean, have the place for people, for the young people to come together, and that, then you're really doing a disservice, and that's can be really detrimental to people who feel lonely, I think.
So we just did an event last week with NC State has a entrepreneurship program that comes out to Silicon Valley every year for a
Okay.
week.
Yep.
Hosted them last year. They've been doing it 15 or 20, well, almost 25 years actually. But I hosted them last year and then we hosted them last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And one of the questions we asked was, I did an exercise with them similar to some of our events where they got to imagine, we wanted their brains to tell us, like, what does work look like when you go to work? And if you're
Yeah.
going to start your own companies, how important it is to have physical space and how important there was about 25 of them or 20 of them, all but one raised their hand high when I asked, do you foresee, would you want, when you go to work or create a workplace, do you want to be around other people in person? And do you see value in that? And everybody but one raised their hand and
Okay.
got into conversation. And they were very strongly said what you just said was that this is our opportunity to grow in relationships and to learn from other people. And we want to be around that. And I think, again, that there is a strange thing happening where people who have been around work for a really long time and believe that the only way the work can get done, which I don't believe is true, but the only way the work can get done is if you do it around other people in a place of work. And then there's the people who have never done it before who are saying, well, for me, it's not that. For them, it's I want to learn, I want to grow. But I think what a lot of what you can do and what these solutions and the clients you work with, it's those people in the middle that are the glue that connect the leaders and the owners of organizations and all the people that are joining to get them the experience and the opportunity they need so they can grow into these roles and build. That's a really strong role that they play in this, and especially in the having at least two meaningful one-on-one interactions. If that's a
Yeah.
connection, to me, there's a big opportunity there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%. Yeah.
The other, so the one, and this is another one, belonging to a community with shared identity and values. That's exactly what you're just talking about. And I do think it's people to get to a certain point in their life and they're like, "Ah, I've got enough friends." You meet
Yeah.
somebody and they're like, I've actually had people say, yeah, we really like you. We're, we've got so many friends though. So we've got a rule. We don't take anybody else unless somebody moves. Cause it's really okay. Maybe it's just me. But,
No.
so then the other his last 3, belonging to a community formed around shared passions, activities, that's, I think, very much tied to that.
Right.
And then so this one I think is interesting, having a third place outside of work for casual social interaction. There is a way I think we've been developing some third places for
Yes.
organizations that are places to work, but I have one client and, well, 2 that are interested, one that's doing it that is a campus of just traditional workplace, but we're creating these places, these third places where people to come, and it's basically anybody who works here can come spend time here, and it's
Yeah.
fascinating who's coming and how they're coming and when they're using it, but the reality what they're saying is, "Well, I just love being here, so
Yeah.
I'm here," and that's what you said in the very beginning of our chat. You're trying to create places people want to be, places they enjoy being, and I think
Yeah.
if we start solving more for that and convincing organizations to create more meaningful experiences, some of this will come like, people will automatically go to these without being asked.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think like where we're at, we don't necessarily have those spaces well, that I know of, but even just your favorite coffee house, I mean, that right there tells you what people gravitate towards. You get the best of both worlds. People love coffee houses to get work done. They like that the constant hum, just you see other people around you. You may even see other people working around you, and it's a natural inclination to want to work. And then you've also got the social aspect of it too. So I think in at least where I'm around and what I see, it's that people have their favorite coffee shops and that's where they go. So if that's any signal to what workplaces could aspire to is getting that vibe, at least in somewhere in the workplace, I think
Yeah.
makes a big
Well, I
difference.
think, yeah, I mean, you're getting way beyond the sad break room. I think anybody that starts, and I'm assuming you're doing it, you take a space like that and where traditionally a corporate office space, it was tucked in an inside
Yeah.
corner of space. It was enclosed. It was like
Yeah.
trying to keep the noise and the smell down. And instead bringing that to the front, bringing it to the glass, bringing it to the celebrating it as this is a place where we come together and share ideas and bump into one another.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what we're about is trying to engineer the things that create more of those moments and more of that stuff happening and acknowledging that collectively that is part of work. And I think, what I would say, if we can collectively facilitate more connections being made and maintained and strengthened, I think we're doing something great.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I totally agree with that. It's a big achievement that we need to do, but there are steps and there's things that we just need to take time. And I mean, what you said before about it's an investment, it is an investment. It's not to be taken lightly. And it's not only is it an investment in money, but it's an investment in time and taking that time to understand really what it is you want to accomplish, how you really work best. So it is taking the time to actually do that and having the passion because in the end, it's going to yield great results. I really think so.
Totally agree. Well, thank you for making the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, and hopefully we can find something to collaborate on sometime soon and find some company who is looking to make a real difference in there. Because I think at the end of the day, companies that double down on this right now, and you said this at the beginning, it's more important than ever to create a meaningful experience at work are the companies that are going to attract the best employees and they're going to have the best talent, they're going to do the best work. It's a pretty
I agree. I agree. And it's attainable. You just, and we're getting closer and better about reaching those goals easily and seamlessly, and it's not as hard as they may think. So,
Well, thank you, and take care, and we'll hopefully talk to you sometime soon.
yep, sounds good.
All right.
Thanks, Brett.